The lobby of the Crestwood Grand Resort smelled like money, not the kind that was earned quietly over decades. The kind that was performed, loud marble floors, chandelier light that fell on certain people differently, staff who smiled wider at certain last names. Chicago's lakefront had always known how to make the wealthy feel chosen, and on this particular Friday evening, the lobby was full of people who believed they belonged there. Before we move on, tell me in the comments which state you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe. Tomorrow's episode may touch a story that is still unfolding. Malik Os did not carry that belief on his face. He carried 2 children instead. His daughter Amara, 9 years old, held his left hand with both of hers. His son Kofi, 7, dragged a small blue suitcase behind him with the focused seriousness of a boy trying to be helpful. Malik wore a clean-pressed shirt, dark trousers, shoes that were not new but were not broken either. He stood at the check-in desk with the quiet posture of a man who had learned early that rooms do not always welcome you, but that you stand straight inside them anyway. Desiree stood 3 feet away from him, already separate. She had been separate since the drive, since the week before that, since longer than Malik had allowed himself to name out loud. She wore a white linen blazer that she had purchased specifically for this trip. Her hair was flawless. She was scanning the lobby the way people scan a room when they are looking for an audience. She found one. Across the lobby, near the grand staircase, a group of people radiated the specific energy of inherited wealth mixed with social ambition. Designer luggage, easy laughter. The kind of group that does not invite people in, they simply allow them to approach. Desiree recognized one woman from a Chicago social media circle. That recognition moved across her face like a door opening. Malik was mid-sentence with the front desk associate when Desiree stepped away. He noticed, he finished his sentence, he turned. She was already moving toward them. Kofi looked up at his father. Malik looked at his son for exactly 1 second, then looked back at the desk. He asked the associate a question about the room. His voice did not shake. His jaw did not tighten visibly. He was a man managing the distance between what he felt and what he showed, and he was very good at that particular distance. Amara watched her mother laugh at something one of the group said. The front desk associate asked for a second form of identification. Malik reached into his jacket. The lobby continued its performance around him. The chandeliers did not dim. The marble did not crack. Nothing in the room acknowledged that a family had just quietly split at a check-in desk on a Friday evening in Chicago. But something had shifted. The kind of shift that does not announce itself. It simply settles into the room and waits. Desiree returned to the desk, but she did not return the same way she left. She came back with the group trailing loosely behind her, close enough to witness, far enough to pretend they were not watching. It was a specific social choreography. Malik had seen it before in other rooms, other versions of the same performance. The audience is never accidental. The audience is always the point. She stood beside him at the desk and looked at the room right on the associate's screen. Then she looked at Malik. "You booked a standard room." She did not phrase it as a question. Malik did not look up from the paperwork. "It is a good room." "These people," she said, her voice dropping just low enough to feel private, but carrying just far enough to feel public, "are in suites. Do you understand what this looks like?" Kofi had stopped pulling his suitcase. Amara had gone very still. Malik signed the form. He thanked the associate by name. The name tag read Jerome, and he took the key cards, 2 of them. He held them without turning around. Desiree stepped closer. Her voice lowered further, which somehow made it sharper. "I have worked too hard to stand at a budget counter in a lobby full of people who matter. You cannot even afford to be here the right way. You embarrass me. You embarrass these children." The word embarrass landed on Amara's face like a small blow. The girl did not cry. She was 9 and she had learned, as children of quietly fracturing homes learn, to hold her face still. But her grip on Malik's hand tightened. He felt it. He registered it the way a man registers something he will carry for the rest of his life. Malik turned around. He looked at Desiree with the particular steadiness of a man who has already decided not to perform his pain for an audience. He said nothing for a full breath. The lobby noise continued around them. Jerome at the front desk found somewhere else to look. "These children," Malik said quietly, "are standing right here." That was all he said. Desiree held his gaze for a moment. Then she made a small sound, not quite a laugh, not quite contempt, but something in between, and she turned toward the group on the staircase. One of the women gestured to her warmly. Desiree moved toward that warmth without looking back. Kofi picked up his suitcase handle again. He pulled it forward one step, then stopped, waiting for his father. Malik placed one key card in his shirt pocket. He crouched to Kofi's level, took the suitcase handle from his son's hand, and held it himself. Then he stood. He reached for Amara's hand. She gave it to him immediately. The three of them walked toward the elevator. The lobby continued around them. No one stopped. No one acknowledged. But Jerome at the front desk watched them walk away, and something in his expression was not professional courtesy. It was recognition. The quiet kind. The kind that comes from witnessing dignity operating under pressure. The elevator doors closed, and the lobby disappeared. Inside the elevator, Kofi looked at his reflection in the mirrored wall. He straightened his collar with 2 fingers, slowly and deliberately, the way he had seen his father do before church. Amara leaned against Malik's arm. Malik looked at the illuminated floor numbers climbing without expression. The room was on the 7th floor. It was clean. It faced the lake. Malik set the suitcase near the wardrobe and opened the curtains. Chicago's lakefront at evening held its own authority, the water dark and wide, the city lights beginning to assert themselves against the fading sky. He stood at the window for a moment before turning back to the room. He ordered room service for the children. He helped Kofi wash his hands. He sat with Amara while she ate and answered her questions about the lake and about the boats she could see in the distance. He did not mention their mother. She did not ask. Children understand avoidance not as deception but as protection, and Amara was a child who had already learned to accept that particular form of love. After the children were settled, Malik sat in the chair near the window. He did not reach for his phone immediately. He sat with the quiet the way certain men sit with things they cannot yet speak, fully, without flinching, without rushing toward distraction. Outside, the lake held its silence. The city hummed beneath it. Somewhere in this building, Desiree was laughing in a room that felt more like her than this one did. He let that thought exist. He did not fight it. Then his phone vibrated. It was not a call. It was an encrypted message from a contact saved only as R. Osai, attorney. The message was 3 lines, no greeting, no explanation of timing. Your father's estate documentation has cleared probate review. The primary asset requires your immediate attention. I am in Chicago. I am available tonight. Malik read it twice. His father, Roscoe Osai, had passed 14 months ago. Quietly, in a hospice outside of Chicago's South Side, with Malik holding one hand and a nurse holding the other. He had left very little in the visible sense. A modest apartment, some furniture, a box of documents Malik had placed in storage without fully opening because grief has its own schedule, and Malik had been managing 2 children and a marriage that was already failing. He had not known about an attorney named R. Osai who shared his father's surname. He had not known about primary assets. He looked at the lake. He looked at the children sleeping. He typed one word back, tonight. Then he sat for another moment in the chair, in the clean room on the 7th floor of the Crestwood Grand, and something moved across his face that was not grief and was not hope, but was something older than both. Recognition, maybe. The slow arrival of something that had always been waiting. The attorney's name was Renata Osai. She was not a relative by blood. The name was her late husband's, a man who had been Roscoe Osai's closest friend for over 40 years. She was 61 years old, wore reading glasses on a beaded chain, and carried a document case the color of aged mahogany. She met Malik in the hotel lobby at 9:15 in the evening with the composed efficiency of a woman who understood that important things should not be delayed by atmosphere. They sat in a quiet corner near the east window. She placed the document case on the table between them and opened it without ceremony. Your father protected this for 32 years, she said. He did not tell you because he was waiting until you were standing in the place where it mattered. He believed the moment would find you. She paused. I believe he was right. Inside the case, a digital preservation drive, a sealed physical deed printed on archival paper, a chain of title documents spanning 4 generations, and a recent legal opinion from a property rights firm dated just 11 days ago. Malik picked up the deed first. The land description was precise and formal, legal coordinates, boundary markers, lakefront measurements. But the name at the top of the original grant was unmistakable. Ezekiel Osai, 1941. His great-grandfather. Renata let him read without interrupting. She understood silence as professional courtesy. When he looked up, she was ready. The Crestwood Grand Resort, she said, was constructed in 1987 on land that was transferred out of your family through a fraudulent municipal rezoning in 1971. Your grandfather contested it. The contestation was buried. Your father spent 3 decades building a legal record that could survive a modern court. She tapped the recent legal opinion. Under Illinois Property Reclamation Statute and the 2026 Federal Ancestral Land Rights Amendment, your bloodline holds the underlying land rights, not the building, the land beneath it, which in property law means everything. Malik set the deed down with the careful deliberateness of a man handling something irreplaceable. The resort, he said slowly, is sitting on our land. It has always been sitting on your land, Renata said. Now you have the legal standing to say so out loud. He looked at the lobby around them, the chandelier light, the marble floors, the staff moving with practiced efficiency through a space that had been built on something taken. He looked at the front desk where Jerome was assisting a new check-in. He looked at the grand staircase where Desiree had walked toward a different life just hours ago. He picked up the drive and the deed. He held them the way his grandfather had probably once held the original, not with celebration, but with the gravity of something owed. What do we do next? He asked. Renata closed the document case. You stay, she said simply, and you do not move. Renata spread the chain of title document across the table and walked him through it the way a surgeon walks through an anatomy, precisely, without sentiment, every detail load-bearing. Ezekiel Osai had received the lakefront land parcel in 1941 through a legitimate federal homestead grant. He had farmed it, built on it, and registered it through Cook County with documentation that was clean and unambiguous. The land had been in continuous Osai family use for 30 years. In 1971, the city of Chicago initiated a municipal rezoning project for lakefront commercial development. The rezoning required the acquisition of several private parcels. Most owners were compensated. Ezekiel Osai, then elderly and without legal counsel, was presented with a transfer document that his family later discovered contained deliberately obscured language that transferred not just development rights, but full title, in exchange for a compensation figure that was 40% below assessed value and paid in a form that was never fully cleared through the banking system. Ezekiel signed. He did not understand what he had signed. He died believing the land was still in his family's name. His son, Malik's grandfather, Bernard Osai, discovered the full scope of the transfer in 1978 while attempting to pay property taxes. The land was no longer registered to the family. Bernard contested through local courts. The contestation was assigned to a municipal review board that had 2 members with direct financial interest in the lakefront development project. The review was dismissed in 1980 on a procedural technicality. Bernard documented everything. He passed the documentation to his son Roscoe. Roscoe spent 32 years building what his father could not, a legal record sophisticated enough to survive modern scrutiny, filed with an independent property rights firm, cross-referenced against the 2026 federal amendment that specifically addressed ancestral land claims involving fraudulent municipal transfer. The amendment had passed in March of the current year. 11 days ago, the legal opinion had been issued. The Osai family claim was valid, documented, and actionable under current law. Malik sat with this for a long time. 3 generations of men had carried this. His great-grandfather had signed a document he did not understand and lived with the quiet wound of that. His grandfather had fought and been silenced by a rigged process. His father had worked in the shadow of that silence for 3 decades, building something patient and precise and permanent. And Malik had walked into this resort tonight with 2 children and a key card for a standard room, not knowing he was standing on his own ground. My father never told me, he said, not as an accusation, as something closer to wonder. He told me once, Renata said, that he wanted you to walk in as a man, not as a mission. He wanted the land to come to you, not you to the land. She was quiet for a moment. I think tonight, both things happened at the same time. Malik folded the chain of title document carefully. He looked at the window. The lake was out there in the dark, unchanged, indifferent to everything that had been done in its name. They built all of this, he said, on something they took. Renata nodded once. Then we take it back, he said. By 10:45 in the evening, the lobby had thinned. The high-energy check-ins of Friday evening had moved upstairs. The chandelier light felt different now, less performative, more institutional. Jerome had been replaced at the front desk by a night associate named Patricia, who wore her professionalism like a shield and had likely managed every variety of difficult guest that a luxury Chicago resort could produce. She had not managed this. Malik walked to the front desk with the document case under his arm. Renata walked beside him. He did not walk quickly. He did not adjust his expression into anything confrontational. He simply walked the way a man walks when he knows exactly where he is going and why. He placed the chain of title document and the legal opinion on the desk in front of Patricia. "I need you to contact your general manager," he said. "Please tell them that the landowner is in the lobby and would like to speak with management regarding the property." Patricia looked at the documents. She looked at Malik. She looked at Renata. She picked up the documents and read the first page of the legal opinion with the careful attention of someone who recognized that this was not a standard complaint. "Sir," she said with measured professionalism, "it is late. Our general manager." "The landowner," Malik said, quietly and without adjustment, "is in the lobby. I am not checking out. I am not leaving. I am informing management of a property matter that requires their immediate attention tonight." Patricia held his gaze for a moment. Then she picked up the desk phone. While she spoke in low tones to someone upstairs, Malik stood at the desk without moving. Renata stood beside him with the patient stillness of a woman who had stood in many rooms waiting for institutions to catch up with reality. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them shifted their weight or looked around the lobby for reassurance. A security associate approached from the east corridor, broad-shouldered, measured, trained to de-escalate without confrontation. He positioned himself near the desk with professional neutrality. Malik looked at him once, not with hostility, not with performance, with the simple acknowledgement of a man who saw exactly what was happening and was entirely undisturbed by it. The security associate, to his credit, read that look correctly. He did not move closer. Patricia put the phone down. "The general manager will be down in 15 minutes. "Thank you, Patricia," Malik said. He stepped back from the desk and stood near the east window, the lake dark and wide behind the glass. Renata opened the document case and began organizing the papers in the order they would need to be presented. The lobby breathed around them. A couple crossed toward the elevator, glancing briefly at the two figures standing with quiet authority near the window. A staff member pushing a luggage cart slowed almost imperceptibly as he passed. 15 minutes. Malik could wait 15 minutes. His great-grandfather had waited his entire life. His grandfather had waited until the courts closed the door. His father had waited 32 years. 15 minutes was nothing. The general manager's name was Preston Hale. He descended the staircase at 11:03 in the evening in a blazer he had clearly put on in a hurry, the collar slightly uneven, one pocket flap turned inward. He was a man in his late 50s with the practiced authority of someone who had managed expensive problems for a long time and had learned to project calm as a management tool. He projected it now as he crossed the lobby toward Malik and Renata. He extended his hand. His handshake was firm and brief. His smile was the kind that did not reach anything above the cheekbones. "Mr. Osai," he said, "I understand there is a property concern you would like to discuss." "Not a concern," Malik said, "a notification." Hale looked at Renata. She handed him the legal opinion without introduction. He took it. He read the first page standing up, with the posture of a man prepared to dismiss what he was reading. By the second page, his posture had changed. By the third, he had stopped pretending to stand casually. "I would like to move this conversation to our conference room," he said. The conference room was on the second floor, glass table, 12 chairs, a wall of windows overlooking the lake. Hale made 3 calls before he sat down. Within 20 minutes, 2 men in suits arrived. The resort's on-site legal counsel, a younger man named Davies who carried his own document case and whose professional composure lasted exactly as long as it took him to review the chain of title documentation alongside the 2026 property rights legal opinion. Davies asked Renata 3 technical questions. She answered all 3 without consulting her notes. He asked a 4th. She answered it and then provided a case citation he had not anticipated. He wrote something on his notepad and did not ask a 5th question. Hale sat at the head of the table and worked to maintain the authority of his position while the architecture of that position was being legally rearranged in front of him. He was professional enough not to become aggressive. He was experienced enough to understand what was happening. He looked at Malik across the table. The resort's parent company, he said carefully, is a registered shell entity. The underlying land ownership has not been actively contested in over 40 years. We will need time to. The legal opinion was issued 11 days ago, Renata said. Your parent company's registered agent received a certified notification 6 days ago. This is not a surprise, Mr. Hale. This is a follow-up. The room went quiet in the specific way rooms go quiet when the last available argument has been removed. Hale looked at Davies. Davies looked at his notepad. Malik had not raised his voice once. He had not leaned forward, gestured for emphasis, or allowed any expression of triumph to cross his face. He sat in the conference room chair the way his father had probably sat in difficult rooms, occupying the space fully, spending nothing unnecessarily. What is it that you want, Mr. Osai? Hale asked finally. What has always belonged to my family, Malik said. The meeting lasted until 1:45 in the morning. Davies made 4 phone calls to the resort's parent company legal team. 2 of those calls lasted over 20 minutes. During the second long call, he left the conference room. When he returned, he sat down and placed his pen on the table rather than in his hand, a small gesture, but Renata noticed it, and Malik noticed Renata notice it. The shell company's parent entity had received the certified notification. They had, as organizations handling uncertain legal exposure often do, begun quiet due diligence 6 days ago. Davies confirmed this without being asked. He confirmed it in the tone of a man who understood that the posture of surprise was no longer available to him. What the 2026 Federal Ancestral Land Rights Amendment had established, and what the independent legal opinion had applied specifically to this parcel, was a framework for underlying land rights that survived subsequent development. The building was not in dispute. The resort structure, the business operation, the furnishings and staff and revenue, none of that was the claim. The claim was the land beneath all of it. And in Illinois property law, he who holds the land holds the leverage. Preston Hale understood this. He had understood it since the 3rd page of the legal opinion. The rest of the meeting had been the process of an institution accepting what it could not legally contest. At 1:20 in the morning, Hale asked for a 10-minute recess. He and Davies stepped out. Malik and Renata sat in the conference room in silence. The lake was visible through the wall of windows, black and calm, and indifferent to everything being decided in this room about the ground beneath it. Your father would have enjoyed this room, Renata said quietly. Malik looked at the window. He would have enjoyed knowing it was our room. When Hale and Davies returned, Hale sat down differently. The management posture was still there. It was too practiced to disappear entirely, but the authority behind it had shifted. He was no longer managing an expensive problem. He was managing a transition. The parent company's legal team has authorized preliminary acknowledgement of the Osai land rights claim pending formal court verification, Davies said. They have also authorized the issuance of a temporary property authority letter, recognizing the Osai family as the underlying landholders while legal formalization proceeds. He slid the letter across the table. Malik picked it up. He read it fully. He set it down and looked at Hale. Hale met his gaze. For a moment, something moved across the older man's face that was not professional, something more human than that. Not shame exactly. Closer to the recognition that comes when a person realizes they have been managing something that was never legitimately theirs to manage. Mr. Osai, he said, the resort will cooperate fully. Malik nodded once. He folded the property authority letter and placed it in his shirt pocket, the same pocket where the room key card was still sitting. Both belonged there now. The Crestwood Grand's signature Friday evening event was called the Lakefront Social, a semi-formal gathering held in the resort's grand ballroom that drew Chicago's social elite, lakefront investors, and the specific category of person who attended such events not for enjoyment but for visibility. It ran from 8 in the evening until midnight. By 11:30, it was at the height of its performance. Desiree was near the center of it. She had found exactly the position she had been looking for since the lobby, surrounded by people who matched the image she carried of herself, holding a glass that cost more than Malik's room, laughing in a way that required an audience. She had not thought about Malik since the elevator. She had not thought about the children. She had constructed, with the focused efficiency of a woman who had been rehearsing this life for years, an evening that felt like confirmation. She was mid-conversation when the ballroom doors opened. Malik walked in with Amara on his left and Kofi on his right. He had changed, dark suit, no tie, the quiet authority of a man who dressed not to impress, but to be appropriate to what he was doing. Renata walked behind them, the document case in her hand. Two representatives from the resort's management team flanked the entrance. The management representatives were there not as escorts, they were there as acknowledgement. Desiree saw him from across the room. The laugh she had been sustaining lost its footing. The woman she had been speaking to followed her gaze, then others followed. Malik did not look for Desiree. He looked at the room with the composed familiarity of a man entering a space that belongs to him. He walked toward the center of the room slowly, with both children beside him, and he stopped where the light was clearest. One of the management representatives stepped forward and addressed the room briefly. The Crestwood Grand was honored to acknowledge the Osai family as the underlying landholders of this property, a recognition of a historic claim formalized under current law. It was a short statement. It was said clearly. It landed in the room the way true things land, without drama and with weight. The room processed it in stages. Desiree processed it in the specific, airless way of a person watching a door close on something they had not realized they were standing outside of. The social circle around her did not immediately dissolve, social circles rarely do, but the energy shifted. The people who had welcomed her warmly were the exact kind of people who understood, instantly, what it meant that the man she had publicly humiliated at the check-in desk that evening was now being introduced as the landowner of the building they were standing in. Malik looked at Desiree for the first time since the lobby. He held her gaze for exactly one breath, not with anger, not with the satisfaction of reversal, with something quieter and more final than either, the look of a man who no longer needed anything from her, not acknowledgement, not apology, not even understanding. He looked away first, not because she had won that moment, because she was no longer the point. He crouched to Kofi's level. "You see this room?" he said. Kofi looked around the ballroom. "Yes. Your great-great-grandfather built on this land," Malik said. "You remember that." Kofi nodded with the seriousness of a 7-year-old, receiving something important. Amara took her father's hand. The formal legal process took 63 days. Not dramatic days, procedural ones. Filings, verifications, court appearances where Renata spoke and Malik sat, and the documentation built by 3 generations of Osai men did what it had been built to do. The shell company did not contest. The parent entity, facing both legal exposure and the specific reputational mathematics of contesting a black family's ancestral land claim under a federal amendment designed precisely for that circumstance, cooperated with the efficiency of an organization that had already calculated its position. On a Tuesday morning in late spring, a Cook County judge signed the land transfer order. Malik was in the courtroom with Amara and Kofi. Renata sat beside him. There was no celebration in the courtroom. It was a procedural space, and everyone in it behaved accordingly. But when the judge signed, Renata placed her hand on the table once, briefly, and Malik understood that to be the most she would allow herself. Outside the courthouse, Kofi asked if they owned a hotel now. Malik thought about that for a moment. "We own the ground it stands on," he said. "Is that better or worse than the hotel?" "It is the foundation," Malik said. "Everything else sits on top of it." The Crestwood Grand continued operating. The management agreement was restructured. A heritage acknowledgement was commissioned, a permanent installation in the lobby documenting the Osai family's original land grant, the history of the 1971 transfer, and the 3-generation legal effort that reclaimed it. Jerome at the front desk, who had watched a family walk to the elevator with dignity intact on a Friday evening that turned out to be historic, was among the first staff members to read it when it was installed. Desiree filed for divorce 40 days after the ballroom evening. The filing was straightforward. The proceedings were quiet. Malik did not contest the terms. He retained what mattered, the children's primary residence, the forward motion of what the family was becoming. She received what the marriage had left that was hers to take. She did not receive the legacy. The legacy was never in the marriage. It had been in the ground the whole time, waiting. Malik took the children to the lakefront on the morning the heritage installation was unveiled. They stood outside the Crestwood Grand on the pavement that marked where the original Os land boundary began. Amara read the installation text slowly and carefully, the way she read things she intended to remember. Kofi stood beside her with his hands in his pockets, looking up at the building with the particular expression of a child recalibrating something large. Malik looked at the lake, the same lake his great-grandfather had watched from this land in 1941. The same water, the same width, the same indifferent authority. Nothing about it had changed because of what men had done around it. It had simply continued, as true things continue, through seizure and silence and 32 years of patient documentation, and one Friday evening in a lobby where a man stood straight and held his children's hands and did not move. He had not needed to raise his voice. He had not needed to perform his pain. He had only needed to remain, which is what his blood had always done. Amora finished reading. She looked up at her father. "Did great-great-grandfather Ezekiel know it would come back?" she asked. Malik was quiet for a moment. "I think he knew," he said, "that it never actually left." The lake held its silence. The ground held everything else. If you enjoyed this story, like this video, and leave a comment telling me what you thought. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell to get alerts for new stories like this one. Thanks for watching.